Ceasefire by Rose Mackey. Deep waters. The frost pearl rose through Muha's storm-laden atmosphere like a needle threading through dark silk. Petre watched it disappear into the clouds, feeling the tension he'd been carrying since the bout drain from his shoulders. Bylelle had ordered Verit to punish him, to embarrass him in front of Rowen and the clan. There was no other reason that the warrior would have acted so dishonourably. Even Verit had his own twisted sense of duty. He would never have gone that far without Bylelle's prodding. Far below them, Muha's endless ocean stretched to the horizon, its surface whipped into white-capped fury by the perpetual storms that powered the planet's extensive hydropower network. The floating landing pad where they stood was one of dozens connected by arched bridges that looked too delicate to survive the maritime assault, steady even as waves crashed against their supports. Spacecraft of every shape and form, from a dozen different species, dotted the platforms, and for a single mad moment, he wanted to just grab one and escape. Away from Frey, Bylelle, and all the bullshit politics. He let himself entertain it for a second, before he let reality crash down on him again. He would never abandon his brother and father to the Maman's tender mercies, but Goddess, he wanted to. And Rowen. He wouldn't abandon her here, away from home and her people. That's not the only reason, a dark voice whispered, and he forcefully shut his mental door on it. Amazing, isn't it? Rowen glowed with excitement. Something had changed with them these past few days. He couldn't put his finger on quite what, but it was getting harder and harder to keep the distance between them that kept everyone safe. Remarkable, he agreed. She walked over to the edge of the platform and peered over into the salty spray, laughing as the wind tugged at her headscarf. He might have to go back into the pit at Dalat in a few days, but for now he could be here, surrounded by fascinating alien engineering and Rowen's infectious wonder. McEnroy walked over to them. There is a lodging house on the far platform. I have booked us all rooms there. Call me when you come back up and are ready to do a deal. You aren't coming down with us? He shook his head. No, I told you my people aren't built for it. Our body mass is too heavy. He shuddered. I can't think of anything worse than being underwater. How will we negotiate? There's a conference room at the lodging house, that's what it's there for. Trust me, we're offering Zealan. They'll come to the surface to negotiate. Fair enough. Petre looked at Broken. What about you? He grimaced. I'm with McEnroy. I'd like to be submerged in water about as much as I'd like to sleep in an airlock. I'll see you when you get back up top. They said their goodbyes, and Rowen and Petre piled into the transparent elevator that protruded from the centre of the platform. As it began its descent, the true scale of Muha's underwater metropolis revealed itself. Domes bloomed from the ocean floor like massive submerged pearls, connected by transparent tubes that pulsed with pink and white guidance lights. Schools of brightly coloured fish scattered as they passed, their scales catching the light from the elevator as it descended into the depths. Welcome to Muha. The voice emerged from a speaker above them. Please don the breathing apparatus and shields provided in the compartment next to you. Rowen opened the compartment and rummaged around until she came out with a complex-looking transparent headdress comprised of a small disc with a dozen almost invisible filaments dangling from it. Please place the disc on top of your head and allow the oxygen fibres to fall naturally. Petre complied, and as he did, he felt the fibres tighten until they formed a net over his face and skull. At first, he panicked, thinking it was some kind of trap, until they stopped tightening when they had formed a tight mesh. He checked on Rowen to see that she had done the same. The net was almost invisible, only the slightest hint of sheen where the fibres touched her skin. Excellent. Now tap the centre of the disc to activate the apparatus. He did, and he felt his ears pop. He held up his hand and saw a faint glow surrounding it. He looked at Rowen and realised that the pretty blue glow was a superfine shield covering her entire body, a hair's breadth from her skin. She reached out to touch him and their shields kept them a fingertip apart. This is awesome, she mouthed. We will now activate the pumps. Please do not be alarmed. The tank will fill with water, but your shields will protect you, and the oxygen filaments will ensure that you have breathable air. Just breathe normally. Please hook your feet under the lower railing. He looked down and saw the metal bar on the floor and complied. Rowen reached out and tightly gripped his hand, and for once, he didn't flinch or worry about what she might sense with the shield protecting him. They held onto each other as the water roared over them, the pressure tugging at them, although not as much as it should have, the shields providing an effective counterbalance. In less than a minute, they were submerged. He felt Rowen tug at his hand and he saw her mouth moving. "I can't hear you," he mimed. She gripped his hand tighter. He watched her eyes flicker, and then her image was superimposed on his vision. He accepted the call on his HUD, and her voice rang out, "This is the coolest, craziest shit I've ever done!" She unhooked herself from the lower railing and floated up, doing an elegant backflip in the water. There was another static sound, and a subtle shift in pressure that made Petre's ears pop again, and a movement in the water. An unfamiliar voice spoke, and he slowly manoeuvred himself around to see the visitor. "I am Thumb, your liaison. I have connected your communication devices to our network." The Muhas were a giant cephalopod species. Thumb's central mass was a delicate pink and the same size as Rowen, its eyes a shimmering black. Its tentacles rippled with patterns of green and gold in greeting as it gently floated in the water. It was eerily beautiful. "Your arrival is well timed," Thumb continued, tentacles contracting to move closer to them. "The spring tides bring optimal viewing conditions for our deeper construction sites." "We're honoured by your hospitality," Rowen replied. The elevator merged seamlessly with a large transit tube, the transition so smooth Petre might have missed it if not for another subtle change in pressure. Around them, Muha's citizens flowed, some using personal propulsion devices, others simply floating through the water with natural ease. Most were Muha, but there was a spattering of other water-based species here and there. Thumb instructed them to kick off from the anchor railing, and they were caught in the gentle, persistent current that ran through the tube. "We will take a submersible and tour several of our construction and manufacturing facilities," Thumb explained as they moved deeper into the city, carried on the current. "Thank you," Petre replied. "We're particularly interested in your pressure regulation systems," Rowen said. "As you know, we are building a series of horticultural biodomes." Thumb's skin flushed a dark red, and Petre wondered what it meant in Muha. "Ah, you've done your research. Yes, we have the best pressure systems in the galaxy." The submersible's interior was decidedly cramped. Petre found himself hyper-aware of every movement as Rowen settled into the observation seat beside him, her shoulder brushing his as she leaned around, trying to examine everything all at once. The confined space and the endless dark pressing against the viewport made his warrior instincts prickle uncomfortably. Maybe Broken and McEnroy had the right idea, staying up in the sunshine where a male could see what was coming. He forced his breathing to remain steady, grateful for Rowen's warm presence beside him. Something about her enthusiasm made the crushing depths feel less crushing. "The vessel's controls are adaptive," Thumb explained, tentacles flowing over the panels with practiced ease. A floating display appeared, with a rotating menu, each with a species name on it. "Select your species, and the vessel will display a holographic translation matrix for the controls that you may interact with." "Fascinating." Rowen inspected the controls. Petre caught himself watching her profile instead of the technical demonstration, letting her obvious delight distract him from the claustrophobic press of water all around them. In all his years, he had met no one like Rowen. She was so open with her emotions, her joy, her insatiable curiosity. There was no pretext with her, no artifice or political games. She was more completely herself than anyone he'd ever met. She looked up and caught him watching her and grinned. "This is unbelievable. At least she's having a good time." "The deeper construction zones present unique challenges," Thumb continued as they descended. Petra's hands tightened imperceptibly on the armrests as the darkness deepened. Pressure differentials require creative solutions. The water outside grew darker as they moved away from the main city, but it wasn't true black. Strings of light that reminded Petre of the Nova moths back home marked their path, though these pulsed with complex patterns that seemed almost like language. He focused on the lights, on Rowen's quiet sounds of wonder, using them to ground himself against the irrational waves of anxiety. A warrior wasn't supposed to fear the dark, or the depth, or the crushing weight of an ocean ready to rush in at the slightest crack. "They're beautiful," Rowen murmured as a school of fish that looked like liquid starlight streamed past their viewport. "The krill fish," Thumbs said. "They scavenge from our construction teams, warning of the larger predators before our instruments can detect them. A symbiotic relationship, you might say." "Do you get many larger predators?" The question made Petra's stomach clench, though Rowen's voice held only curiosity. Thumb flexed his tentacles in a complex dance that Petre could not interpret. "Some, particularly in the outer sites. We share the ocean with them, after all." Dark green striations rolled across his skin. "In eons past, we hunted the larger creatures, but we are more focused on conservation now. Most of them are just curious. The sonic fences keep away the true predators." Petre looked out into the night dark, trying to imagine Thumb hunting down some great beast in the water, and the best he could come up with was an improbable picture of groups of pretty, jewel-coloured, squid-like creatures with tiny spears, facing off with a behemoth. He couldn't quite wrap his mind around it. The submersible banked smoothly around a massive support structure that loomed out of the dark, revealing a dome under construction. The scale of it was gargantuan, curved panels of some hybrid material that seemed to grow rather than being assembled, the Muha construction crew crawling all over it. "The membrane is semi-organic," Thumb explained, "allowing it to adapt to changing conditions much like your own skin responds to temperature variations." Rowen shifted forward for a better view, and Petre had to catch her arm to steady her as the submersible compensated for the movement. The contact sent awareness sparking through him, even through layers of shielding. He wrapped his arm around her waist to steady her and held onto the roof railing, secretly grateful for the excuse to hold on to something solid. "Sorry," she whispered, though she didn't pull away. "Got excited." "I hadn't noticed," he replied dryly, earning a quick grin. "Tell me again why you wanted to do this." "Because it's fun," she replied, peering out the viewport. "It's an adventure. Try to unclench enough to enjoy it." His jaw dropped in affront when she poked him in the ribs. "You're missing the view." A sudden surge rocked the submersible, sending Rowen sprawling against him before the stabilizers could compensate. His arms came around her automatically, instincts responding before his brain could catch up. For a moment, pure panic flared. Were they under attack? Had the hull breached? "Pressure variance," Thumb announced calmly, tentacles flowing over the controls. "Quite common at these depths." Petre realized he was holding on to Rowen and set her gently back in her own seat. He returned his attention to the construction site, steadfastly ignoring both her warmth beside him and the way his hands curved, wishing he could actually feel her, just for a moment. It was a mad thought. Without the shielding, he would never have allowed himself to be this close to her, for fear that she would sense what was really going on with him. He made himself push all thoughts of Rowen out of his head as they completed tours of 2 more construction sites and inspected several designs before he was satisfied that the pressure regulators would meet Casti's specifications. They returned to the lodging house on the surface to meet McEnroy, to complete the negotiations. Petre had never been so grateful to see sunlight. Out of the water, Thumb was less graceful. He used his tentacles to drag his bulk across the floor and into a large open bowl next to the conference table that appeared to pass for a chair for the Muha on land. The actual negotiations were quick. They agreed on the specifications they had sent on in advance, with a couple of tweaks suggested by Thum. They haggled a little over price, but not much. The Muha were fair and delighted to be paid in Zealand. McEnroy entered his approval code and arranged for the Zealand to be transported on the next armed Malurian battlecruiser, leaving Dalat. It was almost anticlimactic. But the early completion presented an unexpected opportunity. Bylelle and the Frost Pearl were not due back for several days, completing an errand elsewhere. Petre didn't know what the errand was, and he suspected he would be happier not knowing. Most days he assumed the goddess had abandoned him, but every now and then she threw him a lifeline. There would never be a more perfect time to get the chance to meet the rebels on Int Galwan. When Thumb invited them back down to the city for a further visit, Rowen was reluctant to leave McEnroy and Broken for so long, and he saw his chance. "We could head to Int Galwan early," he suggested. "The Mining Association's facilities are ready for inspection. We could meet the Frost Pearl there." McEnroy was decidedly unimpressed by the suggestion. "It's not a good idea to change the itinerary without approval. The Frost Pearl is our designated transport," he said flatly, eyeing Petre with suspicion. "But not our only option," Petre insisted. "Int Galwan is a major trading hub. There must be commercial vessels heading that way." He felt Rowen studying him and refused to meet her gaze. She was too perceptive by half. The last thing he needed was her picking up on the real reason he wanted to reach Int Galwan early. "Actually," Tum offered, "the Star Whisper departs tomorrow. Luxury commercial cruiser, very respectable." A pause. "Though perhaps not quite up to Maman standards." "Wonderful." The word escaped before he could modulate his tone, earning another suspicious look from Broken. Goddess wept. He was off his game today. "We can arrange passage." "Hold on," Rowen cut in, and he caught the slight furrow between her brows that always appeared when she was trying to puzzle something out. "Why are you so eager to abandon our escort? The Frost Pearl is perfectly capable of—" "The sooner we complete these inspections, the better," he said smoothly. "Besides, it seems wasteful to keep a diplomatic vessel waiting when commercial transport is readily available." It was a reasonable argument. Logical. Practical. Complete shit, of course, but reasonable. Broken's expression suggested he wasn't fooled either. "The Maman will not be pleased." Now that was an understatement. Bylelle would be furious. But then, the bitch was blackmailing him, so he didn't particularly care. If he could get to Int Galwan early, he might be able to slip away and meet with the resistance contact without having to avoid her constant scrutiny. It was absolutely worth the risk. "Cadet Morale," he replied, "has assigned us to complete these inspections efficiently, which is exactly what we're doing." He felt the weight of McEnroy's assessment and bit his tongue to stop himself saying any more. The Malurian was far more politically astute than his warrior facade suggested, but he also knew McEnroy had no love for the Maman's games. "Don't you want to get this finished and head back to your family?" Petre asked. McEnroy studied him, then smiled, showing red-tipped teeth. "Very well. I can understand why you might be reluctant to get back on the Pearl, though I suspect you'll owe me when Bylelle discovers this adjustment to her plans." "I'll handle any diplomatic fallout," Petre assured him, and McEnroy huffed. "It's all right. I'll take this one." He gave him a toothy smile. "She wouldn't dare to punish me." Petre felt a hot spike of embarrassment for the males of his people. How pathetic they must look if an alien felt like he had to protect him from the wrath of one of their own. But he couldn't bring himself to reject McEnroy's offer. Diplomatic fallout was the least of what he'd be handling when Bylelle caught up with them. As they made arrangements for tomorrow's departure, he noticed Rowen watching him oddly. When she caught his eye and raised her eyebrows, silently asking for an explanation, he gave her his best neutral smile. "Very well then," said Thumb. "I'll organise transport for you. Thank you for selecting the Muha Confederation for your purchasing needs. We hope to conduct another transaction soon." Cruising. The Star Whisper was unlike anything Rowen had ever seen. It was gargantuan, a mobile interstellar holiday resort the size of a small city. 50 levels over 100 zones, it had every microclimate known to sentient life and boasted that there wasn't a species in the galaxy it couldn't accommodate. Tens of thousands of staff scurried in its massive hallways, looking after nearly 100,000 guests. They had been assigned a family apartment on a lower deck, one of the few cabins available. It was cosy, a small sitting area with a sofa, table and chairs, and 3 small bedrooms off it. McEnroy was less than impressed at having to squeeze his bulk into the tiny room for the 2 days it would take them to reach Intgalwan. He had shot off a brief message to the Frost Pearl informing them of the change in plans, and as expected, Bylelle was beyond furious. "How dare you go ahead without us?" she hissed. McEnroy had simply shrugged. "I am a Dusan of the Malurian Empire, and mate of the governor of Dalat. You have no authority over me, and I am in command of these negotiations. Maman Frey has instructed me to—" McEnroy folded his arms and cut her off. "You are transport, Maman Bylelle. An escort, that's all. You have no part in this mission, nor say in how we undertake it." Rowen winced at the brutality of shutdown, and Bylelle blanched in fury at the affront. "We will see you on Intgalwan when you arrive. We should be finished by the time you get there, and you can collect us and return home." Bylelle was not inclined to suffer insults gladly. "If you are so eager to reject our hospitality, perhaps you should arrange your own passage home, then." McEnroy was unmoved. "Perhaps we will." He leaned into the view screen. "I can have a Malurian royal transport here within 2 days, Maman. If the Verit matriarchy does not want to support this endeavour, just say so. But make no mistake, I will inform my mate and Frey about your refusal to collect us." She glared at him through the view screen for another minute, and Rowen half expected McEnroy to combust on the spot from the venom and fury burning in her gaze. "Fine. We'll see you there in 5 days." The screen went dark. Rowen whistled low. "She's pissed." McEnroy was looking at the screen with a considering glance. "Better be careful. She doesn't seem like she forgets or forgives easily." He fixed Petre and Broken with a sharp, penetrating look. "Why is she so upset by this? This is rash even for a junior, Maman. They're spoiled and vicious, but rarely stupid." Petre shrugged nonchalantly. "I don't know. Bylelle has been hard work since the start." McEnroy grunted, clearly not buying it. Broken gave Petre a sharp look but refrained from comment. The first day they mostly stayed in their respective cabins, catching up on sleep or work that had been neglected. Rowen threw herself into designs for the garden, a beautiful lattice of interconnected domes and open planting areas, paths and hidden spaces evolving. She was so lost in her work that she almost didn't hear it when Petre knocked on her door. He knocked twice before her brain registered the noise. "Come in." Petre entered, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, having changed from his formal uniform into casual clothing, light pants and a loose shirt. McEnroy's gone to dinner with some Malurian noble he discovered was aboard, and Broken has gone to bed early. "I thought perhaps you'd like to explore the ship. You must be hungry. Maybe we could find some food." Rowen glanced at her work, then back at him, stretching the kinks in her back. "I could use a break. Lead on." The massive corridors of the Star Whisper contained entire street recreations, with architecture from 100 worlds mixed in a dizzying blend of styles. Holographic signs floated in the air, advertising everything from traditional theatre to zero-gravity dance clubs. "It's like someone took every entertainment district in the galaxy and squeezed them into one place," Rowen marvelled, watching a group of fat, fluffy BU float past on their anti-grav platforms. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" Petre's voice carried a hint of amusement, "though I've heard that the food section is worth navigating the chaos." He led her down a narrower corridor, away from the main thoroughfares. The crowd thinned out, replaced by what seemed to be more local traffic, crew members and regular passengers who knew their way around. The restaurants here were smaller, more authentic-looking. Rowen inhaled deeply, the mingling scents of spices and roasting meat stirring a deep nostalgia. Her stomach clenched with anticipation, and her heart squeezed when she realised what they were standing outside. "How did you find this place?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "I may have done some research," he admitted. "The ship's database is quite comprehensive." The tiny storefront was tucked between a Malurian tea shop and what appeared to be a Tritau bakery. The sign was written in Phalosian, and the scents wafting out made Rowen's mouth water. "Is this—" Her throat tightened. "Traditional Phalosian street food," he confirmed. The female behind the counter brightened when she heard Rowen's accent, and they ended up with far more food than she'd planned, a bounty of spiced flatbreads wrapped around roasted vegetables and sauce that made her eyes water, crispy fritters filled with melted cheese and sweet pastries dusted with spices. She cradled the warm bundle of food in her arms and turned to Petre, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe you found this. It smells just like the night markets in the old quarter." "The reviews mentioned authenticity," Petre said, but she caught the pleased note in his voice. "Though I have to admit, I'm a bit concerned about the warning label on that sauce." Rowen laughed. "Phalosian spice tolerance is legendary for a reason. Are you sure you're up for it, warrior?" His eyes sparkled with challenge. "I suppose we'll find out." He paused, then added with deliberate casualness, "I know somewhere we could eat these, if you're interested in continuing the adventure." The hint of mischief in his voice made her pulse skip. "Oh? And where might that be?" "You'll have to trust me," he said, giving her a mysterious smile. "All right," she replied. "Surprise me." The simulated beach was incredibly realistic, black volcanic sand stretching into artificial waves under a dark blue sky. The sight sent a tight pang through Rowen's chest. It wasn't exactly the black beaches of Phalosia, but it was close enough to trigger a rush of memories. They settled on the sand to eat, Petre watching with poorly concealed amusement as Rowen demonstrated the proper way to layer the sauces on the flatbread. His eyes widened at the first bite. "That's intense," he wheezed after his coughing fit. Though to his credit he tentatively took another bite, eyes watering. She huffed a laugh, adding more sauce to her own wrap. "I thought Verit warriors were supposed to be brave." "Brave, yes, given to foolhardy feats of stupidity, no." He cleared his throat, trying to rid himself of the fire still burning on his tongue. "I'm merely allowing my senses to fully appreciate the complexity of the flavors," he said with mock dignity. The waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, and Rowen found herself drawn to their hypnotic motion. Without really thinking about it, she started unlacing her boots. Petre frowned. "What are you doing?" "Going swimming, obviously." She shimmied out of her trousers, leaving her in just her singlet and underwear. "You can't go to the beach without getting in the water. It's practically a universal law." Her senses prickled, and she turned to find him staring in admiration. She preened a little, warmth curling through her. Fair was fair. She'd ogled him half naked during the sparring bout on the Frost Pearl. Why shouldn't he do the same? "Come on, warrior," she called, backing toward the water. "Afraid of getting wet?" He muttered what sounded suspiciously like a prayer to the goddess before starting to remove his own boots. She dove into the waves with a delighted laugh. The water was flawless, exactly the right temperature, with just enough salt to make her float easily. She surfaced to find Petre cautiously wading into the shallows, his trousers rolled up to his knees. He eyed the water warily, like it might betray him at any moment. "You're doing it wrong," she informed him, and sent a wave of water in his direction. He spluttered in surprise, silver hair plastered to his face before his eyes narrowed dangerously. "That," he said with deadly precision, "was a mistake." What followed was nothing short of all-out aquatic warfare. Rowen had speed and maneuverability on her side, but Petre had an edge in tactical planning. She dodged his first counterattack, but his second caught her square in the face, drenching her. "Ha!" he crowed, then yelped as she dove under the surface and yanked his legs out from under him. They battled through the shallows until they were both breathless and laughing. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both, and they collapsed side by side on the warm black sand, watching the simulated sunset paint the dome in shades of violet and gold. "I like you like this, Petre," Rowen said, propping herself up on her elbows. "You're much more fun." "I live to serve, lady." He grinned. Droplets clung to his eyelashes, and for a moment Rowen allowed herself to appreciate the rare sight of Petre completely at ease. "You seem much happier here than on the colony," she observed, drawing idle patterns in the sand between them. He shrugged, his gaze following the artificial birds soaring across the projected sky. "Maybe I just needed a break." He turned to her and smiled. "Or maybe it's the company." She stretched, contented like a cat, and lay down on the sand. "Thank you for this," she said instead, watching the simulated sky. "I haven't had this much fun in ages." "Neither have I." He sounded surprised at the admission. They sat in companionable silence as the artificial dusk settled around them, neither feeling the need to fill the space with words. Rowen pressed her forehead against the viewport, watching Intgal 1 grow larger as they approached. The past 2 days aboard the Star Whisper had been surprisingly pleasant. That evening at the beach had changed things between them. Nothing dramatic, just continuing the shift that had started on the Pearl from colleagues to something that actually felt like real friendship. She smiled, remembering how he'd plunked himself down across from her at breakfast this morning with a data pad and a snarky comment about the ship's temperamental water controls that had made her nearly choke on her coffee, and his annoying smug smile so pleased with himself. She liked this Petre. Oh, he was still smart, still too arrogant, and far too handsome for his own good. But he was also unexpectedly, wickedly funny and caring, and open in a way that she'd never seen him on Dalat. It was dangerous. She could easily fall for this Petre, and that she could never risk. Who knew what version of him would reappear back on the colony? Who was the real Petre? "Quite the sight, isn't it?" Broken's deep voice startled her musing as he settled beside her. He gestured toward the sprawling station. "They say you can find anything here, legal or otherwise. Every race, every culture, all crammed together." The station was a total hodgepodge, a Frankenstein of engineering if she'd ever seen one. The original Alliance core was still visible, but centuries of additions had transformed it into something resembling a massive coral reef floating in space, with lights twinkling like captured stars in its countless nooks and crannies. "It's incredible," she agreed, watching a swarm of maintenance bots zip between the station's extending arms. "The Frost Pearl should arrive in 2 days, plenty of time for our meetings." "I'm actually kind of excited about the negotiations," she admitted. "After staring at specs for weeks, it'll be great to see the real thing." "McEnroy's arranged for us to stay in an apartment on the station. Apparently the Malurian Empire keeps one here for their trade people. Beats these tiny ship cabins," she said, genuinely thrilled at the prospect of a real shower and a room bigger than a closet. She heard footsteps and turned to find Petre heading their way, datapad in hand, and he smiled when he caught her eye. It wasn't much by normal person standards, but compared to the ice sculpture she'd first met, it was practically beaming. "The BMA people confirmed for tomorrow," he said, settling in beside her at the viewport, close enough that she could smell that subtle cedar scent that clung to him. "They're eager to show off their atmospheric toys." "Perfect," Rowen replied, unable to hide her enthusiasm. "Their preliminary designs look promising. They should meet Casti's specs." The ship's computer announced their final approach. Through the viewport, they watched the docking arms extend like giant mechanical hands. Rowen felt a buzz of anticipation. The project was coming together, and somehow, against all odds, she'd managed to make friends with the galaxy's most uptight engineer. Petre lingered in the shadows of Intgal 1's transport station, watching the stream of workers and traders pass through the gates like a living river. His comm with Lucan burned in his mind. "Brother, I've finally heard from them. Our friends are ready to meet with you." "Where?" "I'm sending you the coordinates now. Be there at 2000 hours, your time, tonight." "It's been a long time since I've seen our friends. How will I recognize them?" "I'm sending you the password as well." The coordinates and password had arrived with a subtle beep. "Are you sure about this?" Lucan's hesitation had spoken volumes. "Number." But it's the only option I could find. All the fear, all the pressure he'd walked away from these past few days, roared back, shredding the comfortable illusion he'd allowed himself to inhabit. The morning's meeting with the BMA trade representatives had been almost normal, touring facilities, discussing specifications, engaging with alien technology. He'd let himself sink into it, pretend for a while that this was who he was. Just another colonial engineer living a normal life. But normal wasn't an option anymore. Not with his father's life hanging in the balance. And Rowen. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the memory of her in the artificial waves, her hair darkened by water, her smile bright and wicked. He'd been so tempted to kiss her, nearly given in to the attraction that had been simmering between them for weeks. He had to finally admit to himself that he cared about her. Rowen. Brilliant, fierce, beautiful Rowen who saw through him with terrifying ease and noticed everything. Fool, dangerous, selfish idiot. He firmly closed the door on the image in his mind. He had to focus. He was in one of the most dangerous parts of the station, mooning like a lovesick idiot, a good way to be robbed or killed. Petre checked his surroundings again. His contact was due any minute. As if responding to his thoughts, the merchant materialized from the shadows. "I am Mulat," he said. Petre nodded. He did not volunteer his name. "Do you have it?" The merchant's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, yes." He produced a small case from his voluminous cloak. Latest nano-mesh technology, completely undetectable even to enhanced scanners, perfect for someone who might need to adjust their appearance temporarily. Petre examined the supplies: grenades, pulse rifle, emergency field med kit, and the most important piece of equipment, the mask. He checked the quality of the neural interface nodes, not black market knockoffs military grade, which meant it was most likely stolen. Great, well, it was one more thing to add to his list of sins. It wasn't like he wasn't already stealing state secrets. He pushed the thought aside. "The target is at the location?" "Third booth from the back, just as arranged." The merchant's gaze sharpened with professional interest. "Though I should warn you, he's not alone. Brought quite the little entourage with him." "Thank you." He handed over the bag of credit chips. "Pleasure." The merchant turned around and merged into the crowd. The bar was tucked into one of the station's older sections, where Intgal 1's patchwork nature was most apparent. Exposed pipes ran along ceilings, and the deck plates bore the marks of a dozen different manufacturers, exactly the type of place rebels would want for a clandestine meeting. Or an ambush. Petre scanned the dimly lit interior, on high alert. He touched the nano-mesh mask he wore, reassuring himself that his features were obscured. He desperately wanted this to work, but he wasn't an idiot, and there was no need to expose his identity unnecessarily. The contact had been specific about the location. Third booth from the back. Order the Malurian fire whiskey. He settled into the booth, his back to the wall, maintaining clear sightlines to the exits, and ordered the drink. The half-Verit was easy to spot when he arrived with his companion, the slight points to his ears and the silver-streaked hair marking his heritage. But his movements were relaxed, lacking the rigid control of clan training. He walked with a loose-limbed gait, almost casual. "The night is cold on Verit," Petre murmured as two males approached. "But the heart burns warm," replied the half-Verit. The strangers slid into the booth. "Call me Kane." Up close, the differences were more apparent. Kaney's features showed clear traces of Verit genetics, but his expressions were more open, unguarded. His colouring was warmer than any male Verit he'd ever seen. "Your father was clan?" Petre hazarded a guess. "Tothus," Kaney confirmed. Though that was a long time ago. He escaped during the first wave, helped establish the underground network. His eyes were hooded. "Your brother said that you need our help, but wouldn't go into specifics over the comm. What do you want from us?" Petre's fingers tightened on his glass. "My father is being held captive. He's being used to blackmail me. Movement at the bar's entrance caught Petre-'s attention, and his blood ran cold. He scented the air, and his blood chilled when he captured the familiar scents. How were they here? Petre grabbed Caney's arm. "Run!" he hissed. "It's an ambush! Maman!" The rebel cast him one slashing glance before he was up and moving. Other rebels materialized, standing up from the tables around them, and they ran for the back. They weren't fast enough. The first shot caught one of Caney's companions in the chest, a clean kill. A third rebel tried to return fire, but Varian was faster. He grabbed the male by the shoulder, spun him around and onto his knees. He gripped the male's head and snapped his neck in a single sharp twist. Petre rolled under the table as plasma fire scorched the wall where he'd been sitting. After his initial panic, he realized it wasn't aimed at him. They were methodically executing the rebels. Bylelle's laughter carried over the chaos like bells, horrifying in its delicacy. "Find them all," she commanded, her voice rough with bloodlust. "I want no survivors." Caney made another break for the back exit. Bylelle's shot caught him in the spine, and Petre had to bite back a snarl as the half-Verit collapsed. He watched in horror as his hopes for his father's rescue fell with the rebel. Bylelle stalked to Caney, bent down and whispered words that made Cain's eyes go wide with horror before she entwined her fingers in his hair, a tender mockery of a lover's touch, and hauled his head back to slit his throat. Petre frantically looked around and caught sight of a ventilation shaft behind the bar. He examined the warriors between him and each exit and hardened his resolve. It was his only option. He judged the distance, the time required to get up and over the bar and up into the shaft. Petre waited until Bylelle turned to give orders to her guards, then moved. He grabbed a plasma rifle from a dead rebel and shot the grate out. When Bylelle's warriors instinctively turned to look at the grate, he shot them from behind with methodical precision. By the time they realized someone was behind them, he was up and on top of the bar. He sprinted along it and hauled himself up into the damaged grate, the hot, serrated metal shredding his palms and forearms. He was almost there when plasma fire seared across his ribs. The pain nearly made him fall, but he gritted his teeth and dragged himself into the shaft as more shots peppered the wall behind him. He cursed when he saw the blood smeared on the edges. If his blood was found, they'd find him with a DNA trace in hours. He reached to his waistband and pulled out a grenade about the size of an egg. He ran a thumb over its plain surface, and 5 orange lights lit up. He waited for a breath, and one of them went out. He tossed the grenade back into the bar and scrambled as fast as he could. The explosion was deafening, the fireball behind him searing his feet and lower legs, but it couldn't be helped. He stopped and grabbed the emergency field kit. He fished through it until he found the sealant and sprayed it over his palms, lacerated arms, and anywhere else he felt himself leaking. It wouldn't last long, only an hour, but it would stop him from spreading more DNA everywhere that could lead back to him. Lastly, he took the sanitizer from the kit and sloshed as much as he could back into the shaft behind him, praying that it would be enough to contaminate whatever blood might remain. He heaved a ragged sigh, his wounds screaming, and crawled further into the station's guts, mind racing. Finally, when he was sure he wasn't being followed, he let himself collapse against a junction wall, pressing his hand against the wound in his side. They hadn't been hunting him. They'd been after Caney and his males. Holy shit. That was Bylelle's errand. She was hunting rebels, which meant a network of rebels really did exist, and were a dangerous enough threat that a maman had been tasked to hunt them down. There was a chance that they knew about Lucan. He had no idea how his brother had gone about contacting the rebels, but Lucan was prone to big risks and gambles. They were usually well calculated, but neither of them was thinking all that clearly right now. His thoughts sharpened. He had to warn Lucan, he had to scrub his comms of any trace of their contact. But right now he had a more pressing problem. Beneath the sealant, he was bleeding out. If he didn't get medical help soon, even his genetically advanced healing wouldn't save him. He thought about who he could go to, who wouldn't turn him in, and cursed. He couldn't go to a public healing centre. Unaccompanied Verit males were rare, and their genetic adaptations were unusual enough to be commented on. Bylelle knew that someone had escaped, so it was a reasonable assumption that she'd keep an eye on the medical bays. Right now, Bylelle didn't know the unnamed rebel was him. His mask had protected him. If he let himself be scanned in a med bay, he'd leave a digital trail that would lead right back to him and his brother. He could go to Broken, but Broken was closer than brothers with his father. When he found out that Bylelle had captured him, he would erupt like a supernova. Bylelle would retaliate and more people would die. He could try McEnroy, but he really didn't know him well enough to know if he could trust him. There was only one option, and he really, really hated it. Rowen was deeply asleep when something woke her. She lay unmoving, trying to identify what had disturbed her when it came again. A soft rasping coming from the wall near the viewport that looked out into space. Her heart nearly stopped when a dark figure slipped through the maintenance access panel beside it. Before she could scream, she caught his scent. Cedar and blood. "Petre," she whispered, sitting up. "What in the goddess's name? Please." The raw pain in his voice made her heart stutter. He staggered, catching himself against the dresser. "I need help, and I need you not to ask questions." She was already moving, catching him as his legs gave out. "You're hurt." "Medical regenerator," he gasped. "There's one in the emergency med kit in the kitchen." She tried to help him to her bed, but he pushed at her, redirecting them to the bathroom. "Can't leave the room covered in blood." She turned the light on and gasped at the dark, sticky patches that seemed to soak into his skin everywhere, the emergency sealant bulging dark red with absorbed blood, how his hands trembled as she eased him down to sit on the floor. "This needs more than a first aid kit. You need a proper healer." "No." He caught her wrist with surprising strength. "No healers, no questions. Please, Rowen." "Fine," she said. She bolted for the kitchen, retrieving the regenerator from the kit, and was back in a flash, terrified that he might have died in the seconds it took. He helped her peel back the remnants of his blood-soaked shirt to reveal the plasma burn across his ribs. The wound was ugly, but the regenerator would handle it. Still. "This is from a Verit weapon," she hissed. "Someone shot you. Someone from your own people. What happened?" "Rowen." Her name emerged as half warning, half plea. "No!" She pushed him to roll over with her free hand and pressed the regenerator against his back. "This is ridiculous. You're half dead, covered in blood, sneaking into my room in the middle of the night, and I'm just supposed to help you and not ask anything. What's going on?" His jaw clenched. "I can't—" "I think you mean won't," she clipped. "It's not safe for you to know," he said finally, his voice rough. "Please, just trust me." The regenerator beeped, indicating the worst of the damage was repaired. She moved onto his hands and arms, wincing at the raw, hacked edges. "Rowen, I need you to promise me something." "What?" she asked. He reached out and grabbed her, smearing her chin with his blood. "This is important. Knowing this will put your life in danger. I beg you, don't say anything to anyone about this. Anyone." "Why?" she hissed. "You want my help. You need to tell me what's going on." "Number I—" His eyes fluttered, and for a moment she thought he would pass out. His eyes opened again. "I am not a good male, Rowen. I've done things I shouldn't have. But this, I will not draw you any further into this mess. I have that much honor left at least. Please." She refused to respond, her eyes bright with tears. "I know you have no reason to trust me." He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. I shouldn't have come here. I'm sorry. I just had nowhere else to go." She let him stay there for a moment, just resting against her before she gently took his other hand, finishing the regeneration. "I don't know what this is," she said softly. "But Petre, I'm your friend. Please let me help you." He laughed bitterly. "No one can help me." "They definitely can't if you won't ask for it." He remained mutinously silent, and they just sat there, on the floor, in a pool of blood. The little regenerator beeped, almost out of power. She set it aside, suddenly exhausted. "You're done. The skin will be fragile for a couple of days." He reached for her, then seemed to think better of it. "Rowen—" She turned to look at him. She extended her senses to him, feeling to the limit of her strength. She still couldn't get much through his weird smokescreen, but it was enough. She felt his fear, his helplessness, his anger, his desperation, and his care for her. All at once she wanted to cry again. For him, for whatever mess he had got himself into. She reached up to touch his cheek, and he allowed himself to press into her palm. Right then, he reminded her of nothing so much as a starving pup, desperate for any scrap of kindness. "It's all right, Petre. If that's what you need," she whispered. "I'll be a friend. I'll keep your secrets."